Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session of Asia Talent Mobility Alliance webinar on the all important topic of Asia Talent Mobility in a remote work/work from anywhere environment. My name is Avrom Goldberg, and I am based in Hong Kong. I am pleased to be the moderator for today's session. Before I introduce our highly esteemed speakers on this very important topic for the day, I just want to give you a little bit of background on the Asia Talent Mobility Alliance, or ATMA. ATMA is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to enhancing the innovation and development of talent mobility industry in Asia. Our goal is quite simply to create the first global mobility trade organization focused solely on Asia, that is located in Asia, actively supports the talent mobility and relocation community in Asia, and basically it's all about Asia talent mobility. Our mission is to be the authority on global mobility for governments and business alike throughout Asia, to provide support to mobility professionals and stakeholders throughout Asia by facilitating communication, education, community, and advocacy. And finally, to reflect, embrace, and promote the distinctiveness of Asian countries, Asian cultures, industries, and individuals within the framework of global mobility. So pretty lofty set of goals and ambitions, but we're pretty serious about this. Our vision ultimately is to enhance the innovation and development of the talent mobility industry in Asia and of Asia. So in short, we are founded to represent, develop, advocate, and innovate for the global mobility community throughout Asia. So membership will be opening soon at the individual level. But for those actively involved or interested in talent mobility in Asia, please find and follow us on LinkedIn, ATMA Asia Talent Mobility Alliance, or stay up to date via our website, which is very straightforward, www.asiatma.com. asiatma.com. So on to today's session. Today's topic for discussion, it's no exaggeration to say that this is one of the burning issues of the day. In recent times, across HR broadly, as well as in the global mobility community specifically. I'm absolutely delighted to have two highly experienced corporate HR professionals with us today to discuss this topic. Daniel Wan, Vice President of Worldwide for Human Resources for Atatec and MKS brand, company based out of Hong Kong, and Shuman Yao, Senior Manager, Global Mobility for Micron Technology based out of Singapore. In a moment, I'm going to let each of them briefly introduce themselves and just briefly also explain what it is that their respective companies actually do. But first, I just want to confirm the four discussion areas that we are going to focus on today. Area one is, what are the key current near-term challenges for talent attraction, talent development, and talent retention in Asia? Two, what role does mobility play, and should mobility play, in advancing corporate talent agendas worldwide? Are there any material differences in approach that are required in Asia? Three, the real meat and potatoes heart of the discussion is, what is the current status of COVID-induced changes in the way we work, deploy talent, and travel for business in Asia? How are these likely to translate into this post-COVID era that we finally seem to be joining the rest of the world on in Asia? And are there any key differences with other regions of the world? And finally, we're going to ask Daniel and Shuman to look into their 2023 crystal balls and tell us what they think are going to be the priorities in APAC for the corporate talent mobility agenda in the next 12 to 15 months. Lots to discuss, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel. As Avrom said, I lead the HR function for Atatec, which is a MKS brand. The two companies came together in August this year. We're a NASDAQ company, primarily in the specialty chemicals and electroplating equipment area, mainly servicing the electronics and automotive markets. For some reason, I've always been in HR, started off in consulting, and for some reason, my career has been mostly focused on chemicals in relation to high tech. So my apologies to everyone first in terms of the bias in my perspectives. Will be limited to mostly that exposure.
They're very well informed biases, if they are biases, Daniel. Sorry, but that's just someone coming from someone who's known you for 20 years. Thank you for that. Schumann.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Xiumin. I actually head the global mobility function over here in Micron. I am based in Singapore. So for me, I always like to share my career journey with everyone because I was literally a new college grad with Micron, and I was given the opportunity to work in different functions within the people organization before I landed myself in mobility. And that is sort of like my day job that I always tell people. I do have a night job other than being a mother of three. I am also the co-lead for Micron's Women Leadership Network. It's actually an employee resource group. And again, I'm always excited to collaborate with people who are also on this journey as well. So, right after the call, if you are also working on the Women Initiative, please feel free to connect with me. So a little about Micron, very similar, I think, Daniel, my perspective may be also a little biased. So because I've been with Micron all this while, but for Micron, I always tell people that you can't find our products in the consumer market, but in fact, you might be using our products even without you knowing. We are a semiconductor company where we manufacture the memory and the storage solution. So what it means is that it's basically that chip, right? That could be embedded in the things that you use every day, like your mobile phone, even in your cars, or even in your laptop, I would say. Yeah, so I always like to tell people that if you want to find out the Micron product, maybe what you can do is that, don't take a working laptop, take a laptop or an iPhone that's not working, rip it open, and maybe here you go, you will find the Micron product there.
Thank you, Shu. Excellent. Right, we've got a lot to get through today, so we're going to kick off with question one. Question one is, what are the key current and near-term challenges for talent attraction, development, and retention in Asia? There's a lot of challenges to pick from, but we're asking Daniel and Schumann each to zone in on what you consider to be the top challenge that's actually facing business in terms of talent attraction, development, and retention in the Asia region. Daniel, we'll start with you.
Thank you. From our perspective, I mean, we see the battleground is in the ensuing years is firmly going to be in South and Southeast Asia, we believe. We're seeing a lot of fiscal support from governments for expanding their semiconductor and display, as well as to diversify their supply chains. So, for example, the U.S. CHIPS Act, the India Semicon program, all these are meant, to attract FDI, in order to grow their systems as such. So, that's obviously going to lead to a ramp up and manpower deployment challenges, in the region, etc. And against that backdrop, then of course, the recent last 2.5 years, the COVID experience comes into the mix, with a lot of these discussions about work from home, hybrid work opportunities, etc. So I think that's probably the forest, that we're trying to find a way through.
Got it. Thank you, Schumann.
Yeah, I would say that Daniel has really summarized it well to create that perspective. So I think I would just add on to his point. I would think that even this dedicated global economic situation, personally to me, I think that right now is unclear. What can we expect next in terms of the financial implications to the company or even to the talent mobility program. But again, I think rather than focusing on that, I think we need to maybe focus on what we need to do. So I'm sure that, during the pandemic itself, it has actually taught us some good lessons learned, and maybe we could continue to draw on some of these lessons learned and take some time to really pause and think about what we really need to do, right, in order to shift as we continue to move along.
Got it. Thank you. Secondary question, and under the same heading, would be your thoughts, please, on can global mobility in fact be an effective talent attraction, talent development, and talent retention tool? Is it even thought of or designed and deployed nearly enough yet by companies as such in the Asia region? Schumann, let me start with you on that.
Yeah, so Avram, in fact, I never shared this little secret with yourself and Daniel, even during our catch up. But honestly, this question actually reminded me of a conversation that I had really way back when I first joined Mobility. So I think maybe several years back, this is a rather thought-provoking question. And there are really different school of thoughts. There are people who think that it is, but there could be people who really felt that no, mobility is just about moving people from one location to the other. But honestly, from my purview, back then when I was still a very young global mobility person, I really feel that global mobility can be that differentiator, to be the talent attraction and the retention tool, as for us to look at retaining our talent. So in fact, right now, for the global mobility team in Micron, we are actually integrated together with immigration and talent acquisition team. But even prior to this integration, I would say that mobility is actually seen as part of our hiring strategy, in that sense. So in fact, something to add on as well. Recently, I also came across an article that actually talks about attracting and retain talent through mobility, where mobility can be the one to foster that talent attraction and retention, where it actually offers the opportunity for the employees to develop their careers intentionally. So I thought that was very interesting. So my takeaway from the article is that mobility does help to address that whole limitation, right? Where we potentially, couldn't, that we potentially see in terms in the local talent workforce. If today we don't have that talent available, that's where mobility can allow the company to actually tap into that global talent pool.
Terrific. Thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Shuman said, and building on that, I think as long as companies continue to look for more cost-effective, manufacturing and supply bases, that will naturally, create a demand, to ensure a steady pipeline of talents in order to service those businesses in the new international locations. I mean, to put it into practice a little bit more, I mean, if we look at, for example, Samsung, Reddit, over a number of years now, they're increasing their investment in Vietnam, etc. And so, apart from servicing their own talent needs, their supply is going to have to, ramp up in Vietnam as well, right? And I think in the past, probably we'll be going to the headhunters and say that, okay, help me map out the market, for Korean speaking, design engineers, R&D engineers, in Vietnam. Going forward, given the demand is so great, versus the supply, how about, an alternative, for example, recruit in Korea, and like Shuman mentioned, position the overseas assignment, as a development opportunity for them. So this would obviously have, I think, a positive knock-on effect on the employer brand. Understanding that the majority of our professional staff, they join us, looking for a career, not just a job or a transaction as such. So I see there's a very strong link, between the two.
Excellent, thank you. For my part, I would want to add, I'm pleased to say that particularly in the Asia region context, I have noticed definitely over the last several years a move for global companies to increasingly be developing and devising, if not policies, at least guidelines to offer relocation or global mobility options in support of particularly internships and new college graduates, new hires, which is a population, a typical demographic, if you like, in global mobility that is often overlooked. It's not a uniform across the board worldwide phenomenon that all companies actually have structured, or even where they do have structured, have well-structured approaches and programs to that. And this is definitely something that we're seeing in Asia. Is kind of interesting that over the last couple of years, more and more companies actually are utilizing relocation guidelines or policies in support of that, which is a good segue into our next question, which headline to the next couple of questions we're going to talk about is what role does mobility play and should mobility play in advancing corporate talent agendas worldwide? And are there actually any material differences in approach required in Asia? So the lead of question under this headline is, historically, I think we'd all agree that both HR and corporate global mobility were mainly administrative and transactionally focused functions in Asia for far longer than in Europe or North America. Has this changed, and has it changed sufficiently, or to what degree has it changed in your respective views? Daniel, let's start with you.
Sure. I think in the past, the focus has been more on supporting those handpicked Asian top talents going to the US and European headquarters for the exposure and experience and development. Going forward, I think there's going to be much more movement from the other direction, as well as within the Asia region, as well as companies continue to expand and putting more focus on talent attraction, succession planning. So generally, I would say that probably there's going to be some catching up for us to do in the Asia region in the coming years.
Got it. Good. Shimon.
So to add on to what Daniel mentioned, in fact, I thought I also would want to draw on my recent experience because I actually had the opportunity to travel pretty extensively to US and attended several of the mobility conference while I'm there. And one thing I noticed honestly is that the relocation market in US is huge. It's so massive, and it is actually very mature. For Asia, personally, I would say that in the most recent years, I feel that things are actually catching up. We are entering a phase where I'm starting to see that mobility is being considered a lot more widely, and even sometimes in a strategic dimension and not just transactional. So I think, as an overall, I guess maybe the conversation today, and I'm not sure whether is it something just specific to Asia, but or could it be really global, that we really need to look at is how can we continue, from being reactive to be more proactive. So a story which I always like to share is that, again, like Daniel mentioned today, the technical talent that we needed to find may not be located in the region where we actually want them to be. Whether we like it or not, for a company like, that I'm in, we may actually have to bring the talent beyond the border to the location where we needed to base them in. So what happened is that we were actually looking for a group of talent with very key specific skill set. So when we scan the talent market, these talent are not located in the locations where we want to hire them. So literally, we really had to bring them in from Korea. So a lot of times, I think from what I hear from my peers is that when everything is done, deal, the offer is signed, they will hand over this and say that, okay, please move this person. These are the additional benefits that, we'll be providing. And it may fall out from that whole guideline or from the policy. So that's where I would say that the experience I had is rather different. We literally had that engagement with our talent acquisition team and our leaders right at the start when they were doing the hiring, and they were facing like a situation where they couldn't bring the people over. They were actually hitting like, a very complex situation. So rather than designing the program on their own, they literally bring mobility in to the entire conversation. So that's where I think as we continue to work on this talent agenda, it's very important, for the different, stakeholders, be it is mobility, immigration, or any other functions to really come together whenever there's an issue, and kind of put forward a solution.
Good detail there. Thank you, Shimon. I'd actually want to add to that, tying back to the previous question around the around whether global mobility can be an effective talent attraction and retention tool. For my part, having been based in Asia now for 20 plus years, I've definitely seen a transition in recent years, and taking very much taking into consideration, your comment, Shuman, about how much more developed, diversified the relocation industry and market is in North America. But in Asia, absolutely, when I first arrived here, I would definitely say that at the turn of the millennium, global mobility was very much a transactionally focused and transactionally viewed enterprise. And it was all about, as Daniel actually articulated, it was all about, either Asians going to Europe or North America, or North Americans and Europeans coming on typical long-term assignments into key locations in Asia. That was it. That was relocation or global mobility in the day. But there definitely has been a shift to viewing global mobility as a more strategic enterprise, which is exactly, of course, what everybody who works in global mobility has been promoting. And as a result, as organizations in Asia more and more accept that there is a strategic dimension rather than a purely transactional one to global mobility, you're starting to see what I referenced in my earlier point, which was, happy to see, but very definitely there are companies in Asia specifically devising guidelines, if not policies, in support of new hires, grads, interns programs in a number of locations. And I think the other key area where that shift from purely transactional to strategic is evident as well as in domestic mobility. Again, to Shuman's point, one of the reasons why North America has always been leaps and bounds ahead, and just in terms of activity and size of market, is because obviously, Canada and the US are huge countries, and they've historically had very large domestic programs, right? Domestic mobility programs of all sorts and types. But also in recent times, domestic mobility in big countries in Asia like China and India, and even in Japan, has actually taken off, particularly in China and India. And I think that's a further reflection and further evidence in support of the fact that companies in region Asia are actually recognizing, there is actually more to this relocation or global mobility malarkey than actually just getting expats from A to B, and or Asian folks to North America, US, and back. Big question. We're getting to the big questions now as we're approaching the half hour. The headline questions. The next one is going to be what? A lot of talk recently. No, not even recently. We've been talking about this for years, but the dialogue continues, and COVID has only intensified the dialogue. The link between talent and mobility, organizationally. What does at optimal alignment between talent and mobility organizationally look like? So that's the first lofty question we're going to sink our teeth into. Daniel.
Yeah, and I have to say, Autotech MKS, we're just beginning to go down this path, still very much in the learning stage. But one of the things, if I were to think about talent management and mobility together, is the key. One of the key principles in developing top talents is to know your audience. Right? You need to understand what their needs are, what their own personal aspirations are. It cannot be a one-way. So could it be a case of a mobility helping management understand better the individual needs of our top talents when it comes to the overall development plan vis-a-vis also international opportunities as such? Because at the end of the day, once the mobility factor comes in as well, the whole thing about understanding your talent becomes even more complicated, because now you bring into the picture other people too, the family, the spouse, even the pets, for example. So knowing those different needs, between them. At the same time, therefore, I think it also means that having some degree of flexibility in terms of solutions that we tailor-made for some of these guys, so that on the one hand, they understand, they feel that they're being understood, and they're being truly supported, for their needs as part of their career journey. As well as getting the biggest bang for the buck, for the company as well. I mean, the simple analogy is kind of like, if I would cut my finger and Avrom, you bring me a Band-Aid, I would say, well, that's very kind of you. You're such a sweet guy, right? But bring me a Band-Aid, when I banged my head or I've twisted my ankle, and I'll be saying, hello, Avrom, thanks, but no thanks, right? So that's the kind of thinking I think help your mobility can. A lot of the assignments, especially on their first assignment, they don't know what they don't know, and a mobility professional can really help them. You understand what it's about, and together with the management person, partnering together, on the development plan, I think would go a long way in ensuring success and making sure that we're doing the right thing for both sides.
Right. Very good, Daniel. But Daniel, with your extensive, specifically broad HR experience, do you think, and your participation in various HR meeting groups, etc., from a design and an internal organizational structural point of view, do you think there's actually sufficient? Do you think we made strides and progress to the point where, because Shuman, I should actually ask this question after we allow Shuman to talk about, because Micron has a great story, but Shuman is a really reference. Micron has a full integration between talent mobility and mobility and immigration, structurally, organizationally. But that's very much the exception in the corporate world today. It's not the rule, not by any means. Are you seeing any strides towards a better integration? It doesn't not even integration, but dialogue between talent acquisition and talent management and talent development, the talent parts of organizations and the mobility part of organizations, because that's really what a lot of this ongoing dialogue is about, because there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and many companies are still feeling their way towards a solution. And frankly, some companies, I think, are so far behind the curve, they haven't even begun addressing this question. The bottom line is, organizationally, what does that optimal alignment look like between talent and mobility? Are you seeing any advances in that in Asia specifically?
The short answer, I think there's much more to be done. I think as with the past, in the past, still very much more aligned, with more the C&B side of things, where it talks about looking at the cost, and on the other hand, also ensuring internal equity, that kind of things. But at the end of the day, again, my earlier point in terms of knowing by audience, etc. I think that's much more a consideration going forward, especially as we consider the recession challenges that we're looking at. Exactly. So how do we make that work?
Exactly. Terrific. Shuman.
Yeah, so Avrom, before I touch on this question, I thought I really wanted to add on, to your earlier point about the whole part on the domestic mobility in Asia. In fact, I think you have actually struck a very interesting dynamic, because I think maybe if today, again, asking that question back, what would we want to do differently in Asia? I think maybe we should look at, how can we consolidate some of this domestic mobility under the mobility organization? Because I think right now, this domestic mobility in Asia is still pretty much cemented, right? Where for some organization it's under the global mobility, but there are situations where it's sort of under the local HR. Sorry, just give me a minute. My laptop is giving me a lot of issue. I think it's the one that kind of shut down my video and is prompting me some stuff. Okay. Yeah. Whereas on the other hand, if we look at from US, we don't really hear this conversation because domestic US is basically consolidated under the global mobility. So that's why I feel that maybe this might be one potential shift where we need to look at and help our mobility community to see how can we maybe take on that domestic mobility in Asia itself. And the reason for doing that, I feel that it's going to bring about, a good dynamics of even a benchmarking tool, where we can all come together and look at, say, for example, today we are hiring, like you said, right, this NCG, this new college grad or interns in India. How does that whole program looks like, right? That's why I thought that it's going to give us a lot more discussion and benchmarking opportunity. Yeah, and another point that, then back to your question about the optimal alignment between talent. Yeah, talent and mobility. I really like the part when you talk about the structure. It's a very interesting question and perspective that you are bringing up. Yes, I think that in order to win this talent war, it does take the different functions to come together and collaborate. In fact, I'm seeing that actually happening in my organization, where I would say our people leadership team, they are coming together to put together, this people's plan and this strategic plan. So even though this is like a long-term roadmap, but again, having this very collaborative approach, what is happening is that, as time changes, like right now we are in this so-called economic unforeseen situation. What is going to happen next? Do we still execute the plan? Do we have budget to do things and that? It helps a lot, right, for the team to come together again and reprioritize what does it mean in terms of our short-term and long-term plan. So honestly, if you ask me how that whole optimal alignment of talent and mobility looks like, definitely it will be different for each of the company. But I think also to Daniel and your point, understanding your business, understanding your talent movement is important, because that will allow you to then look at how do you structure your organization, what do you have to do, and why do you need to have this structure.
Interesting. Those are very helpful. I mean, those are very insightful comments from both Daniel and Schumann on this topic. I think we're going to come back to this one in 2023. It's a big one, and it's fully deserving of further time.
Yes,
dedicated time on its own. The one thing that I will say though is that before we move on to this one is absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Companies need to know their talent, or their talent audience. They need to know the organization structurally, and the organizational design can and will look different. But I've become a convert on the question of where talent, on where mobility should sit as a function organizationally. And I'll kind of nail my colors to the wall and say I actually totally believe that mobility should actually be part of talent. I think they should be integrated. I think that is just the smart way to go for organizations, as we burrow deeper into the 21st century, and talk an awful lot about how globalization, despite the knocks that it's actually taken in recent years, I don't think globalization is going anywhere. I don't think that's changing. There's some fundamental. I think economics are going to continue to be global, and globalization is going to remain a really important driver in regards to what industry or market you're in. I think emerging markets are not going to go away as a focal point anytime soon either. And I think that it's particularly interesting looking at the economic difficulties that we face right now, and the will we or won't we tumble into recession question, which is obviously occupying a lot of minds, particularly in C-suites. But really interesting to see that all the forecasts as of right now, all the economic forecasts as of right now for 2023 point to the fact that we might just manage to dodge a recession, global recession in 2023. But the extent to which we actually manage to dodge that recession, or even if we do go into recession globally, mitigate that recession, the extent to which we can soften it or avoid it is largely dependent not on what happens in North America and Europe, but what happens in Asia. The reliance is on Asia to actually avoid us falling into that, falling into recession. The economic forecasts for growth in North America and Europe are very anemic, whereas there are several markets in the Asia region right now, even with everything that's going on, that still have fairly dynamic and robust economic growth forecasts for 2023. And article that I saw on CNN the day before yesterday spoke about the fact that as of right now, Asia will account for, in terms of the aggregate of all the major global economic forecasts for 2023, Asia will deliver 3/4, 75% of any growth that the global economy is actually going to see in 2023. Not going to come from North America, not going to come from Europe or anywhere else. It's going to come from Asia. And of course, even with all the trouble that China's having right now, China and India are in particular are the two key drivers within the Asia region. So I just find that interesting in tying back the question to what does optimal alignment between talent and mobility look like in an Asian context. Then it's not surprising the pressure is on companies, whether they're Asian headquartered or foreign headquartered, operating in Asia, to really harness effectively their talents and mobilize that talent in order to come through on these high expectations, right? And of course, the war for talent is just as real, if not more real, in Asia than it is anywhere else. Anyway, enough for me as we move on to the heart of today's discussion, the big question, the biggest question of all, which is, as we look at the current status of COVID-induced changes to the way we work, the way we deploy talent, the way we travel the business, and how these have actually translating and are likely to continue to translate into this post-COVID era in the Asia, which is only now arriving in Asia, with the exception of mainland China still. What are the key differences in these changes to the way we work, travel, and deploy talent between Asia and other regions of the world? And the kickoff question under this heading, and really the key question for today, is what is the impact of remote work and work from anywhere throughout the region generally, and then on mobility specifically? I'm going to mix it up here and actually, Dan, why did you go first?
Sure. We clearly see some regional differences, between Asia and, for example, versus Europe and the Americas. During the COVID years, since 2020 and 2021, we did a series of employee surveys within the company, basically, trying to get some feedback in terms of, some of the protocols that we installed. Are they working for you? Should we be doing something different, etc. And from there,
sorry, Dan, but just be clear. So this was a check-in on the work from home protocols that you put in place during the time, right?
Amongst other things, under the COVID umbrella.
Got it.
And I have to say, it's not entirely black and white, but on the whole, we do see a relatively lower demand, for work from home in Asia versus in the other Western locations as such. Not sure why that is. And sometimes we joke about, for our Hong Kong folks, because, we all live in a shoebox, that people actually quite look forward to leaving the house in the morning. But, joking aside, I think taking this a little bit further, I think many of us might agree that, the success of the COVID experiment, working from home and all that, is primarily relied on a group of employees who have worked together for many years in the past, with pre-established work relationships, tacit understanding between team members, etc. If we were to make remote work and work from home a permanent feature going forward, this would bring a lot of added complication. I mean, already we see a lot of studies, surveys, coming out saying that people are missing that the workplace relationships to the extent that people feel that it might impact the career progression and promotion opportunities, etc. But even more specifically, we can look at things like from an inclusion point of view, languages, right? We could have a hire from anywhere kind of policy because of the talent crunch. And we could say that English is the international business language, but if we put a I don't know, a Lithuanian and a Belarusian and an Indian, and a Chinese together in a meeting, right, and all speaking English, how effective is that? We actually did a small experiment in a prior life. We recorded such a meeting, played it back to some other colleagues, like a listening comprehension, simple questions like, how many people were there in that meeting? Not everybody fared very well. And so that's one challenge. But the other challenge is also time zones, right? Mm-hmm. Are we really ready to work across all these different time zones? And you can imagine, within a team, whether you're ahead in a time zone ahead or behind, etc., right? Chances are your day is going to get prolonged, which is what we have experienced during COVID. As team leader, for example, also, are you prepared to be covering all these time zones as well? Right? So that brings additional complications already. So I think at the end of the day, what the company really needs to consider a few things. For example, how important collaboration is, in our line of work. How important is a factor to our business success? Do our managers ready to lead in a geographically dispersed model? Right? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, what is the kind of culture we want within this organization? And these things need to be aligned going forward. I'll stop here. I've talked a lot already.
Thank you. I like the soapbox. We might come back to you. Sherman, your turn.
Yes. So again, just adding on to what Daniel mentioned, because our industry is pretty similar. So it's true that, yeah, remote work from anywhere. I think we hear some of this success story. It has proven to be successful. But at the same time, I think depending on the industry or the work that you are doing, at some time, there's a need to have a collaboration or even some of this face-to-face as well. So I think, in terms of the remote work, I would say that really maybe first looking at whether does it really kind of fit into your company objective and your entire culture. So I really feel that, but again, I really feel that this term remote work needs to be better defined, because when it first came out, everyone was like, oh, you can work from anywhere. But as you get deeper into the conversation, it could become like, work from anywhere within the same higher jurisdiction. So it doesn't mean like, work from anywhere in the world. So that's why I feel that from a definition standpoint, it has to be clearer. And again, don't quote me, but I really feel that, this part on the remote work, we are going to see more changes so that, as we continue to get clearer and better, at least in terms of the definition piece. The other thing which I really wanted to kind of throw it out, even for our attendees to think about it, is that I think often when someone mentioned about remote work, everyone will start thinking about mobility. So it becomes very gray. Is this really something that mobility will own, or is this something owned by another function within the people organization? So remote work is one piece, and on the other hand, companies are also looking at sort of a flexible or hybrid work arrangement in the country itself. And this part of the flexible work arrangement may not be handled by mobility. It may be handled by some other function within the people organization. So the question is that, is there any opportunity to even integrate this all together and then to come up with that whole solution in terms of the remote and hybrid work? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. I would just add, before I come back to asking follow-up questions in this regard, from my perspective, a couple of things. I think we would all agree. We can argue about the impact and the extent and the degree to which remote work and work from anywhere is going to take hold or take root and apply to which industries and which geographic regions and just globally. The one thing I think we can all agree on, that hybrid work is here to stay, right? I mean, the hybrid option, that's not going anywhere. Going away anytime soon. Personally, I think that's probably the greatest structural change that COVID has affected in terms of going to the office. I think Daniel made a very important point, and I couldn't agree with it more. I mean, yes, it is. Jokingly, the the question, the point around space, living space, in places like Hong Kong, but it's a real factor. It is a very, very real factor. That it is simply more advantageous for many people to actually be able to work in an office than it is to work from home. And this is not just Hong Kong. There are lots of other locations in Asia with a similar dynamic in play. The other factor I think also is just what I call long COVID, but in a different context. I mean, Asia's actually battled with and has slugged on under the cloud of COVID longer than any other part of the world, right? Because it started here, and my God, it still seems to be, hanging, overhanging still in certain parts of our region, rather too emphatically for anyone's liking. But my point being that people have actually worked on this enforced, not even by choice, but a lot of it enforced work from home for such a long period that I think there's actually an even greater appetite, to get back into the office and be able to, a bigger drive to reconnect because of the isolation that the enforced remote work can actually bring. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that I don't think there's been nearly enough research. I mean, there's a lot of research that has been done, but I don't think there's enough that it should done a drill down. And again, I think that's the critical distinction, which is what both Daniel and Shimon have mentioned. The critical distinction, a critical distinction in this whole question of the desirability and effectiveness of remote work / work from anywhere is the distinction between existing employees and new employees. And I think a lot of the research dodges making that distinction. And I frankly think, I suspect that there's a lot of high-level PR, overblown PR that's been put into the, into the marketplace. Companies trumpet the fact, we're congratulating themselves on successfully transitioning, making and adapting. I think a lot of companies are mistaking survival for success. We survived the enforced new ways in which we need to work. It's not necessarily making a success of them. And I think it's a critical distinction around between those people who are already part of the organization, so they know the people that they sit on Zoom calls with endlessly already. They know them personally. They have those connections. They understand the culture. They understand the company. They are armed with all of the advantages before they went into enforced work from home. All of the advantages of being familiar with other individuals and the company culture. Bringing brand new people entirely remotely or from anywhere into the organization, totally different thing. Totally, and I don't think there's been enough analysis done yet on that. The other thing I would also say, again, to get Daniel's point on, you said managers, are managers ready to manage to a geographically dispersed model in a remote context? Again, I don't think there's nearly enough research that has probed for what are the specific set of competencies required to effectively manage in a geographically dispersed model. So these are just some of the orders of questions of the day, which I think we will return to in another time. Very quickly before we move on to the closing question, but tied to everything that we're talking about, love to take your views on, and I'll kind of come to you first, Shimon, on this time, switch it up a bit. The whole question of virtual assignments. Are virtual assignments really a viable form of talent mobility?
Thanks, Avrom. I think this is a super tough one. I think for virtual assignment, looking at one hand, yes, that plus points, right, of virtual assignments is that it does help to widen your talent pool. Especially there could be situation where families and individual, they were not considering moving. And because of this virtual assignment arrangement, they will be willing to accept the job. But again, I think, back to the earlier point, I think it's very important to first assess whether can this job be even performed remotely. What is the purpose and the objective where you need this person to do before kind of determining whether we need to have the virtual assignment. And I will also want to kind of bring in two different dimensions over here, because often I think we are saying that, oh, these are the plus points of virtual assignment, but at the same time, so two other points which I want to talk about is really the security as well as the collaboration. So on the security part, if you are really working in companies where, maybe the proprietary data is one of the top priority, I think that is also something that we need to really consider about really what is the potential concern, or the country where the person is working virtually in. Could there be a high risk what the person needs to do in order to mitigate that? So I think there's a need to really consider that security piece. And the last one is really on collaboration. I think it's not just in terms of the team collaboration, but also like to your earlier point, whether are the managers even ready to manage like a virtual team or a virtual project? Because again, during the pandemic, I think we learned that whole importance of teamwork, and at times, face-to-face can really bring about a different element of collaboration as well. So personally, from my own purview, I think I'm more of a fan of the hybrid and flexible work arrangement as a more viable talent mobility option. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Daniel.
Yeah, I think technology does make virtual assignments possible as such. But I think at the end of the day, it's not just about getting the work done, but it's also about the people and the org connection as well. So if we cast the lens, of a short-term assignment here, for example, it's a troubleshooting assignment. I can see that work. However, otherwise, I think virtual assignments could be missing out on a number of critical opportunities here. And if I were to play this out a little bit more, creating some of these virtual assignments over time, I think people would see the need to be there. And after a while, I think in a management meeting, somebody would ask the questions: how come our T&E is so high? And people are based at the wrong locations.
There you go, exactly. Excellent. Well, again, this is also a biggie, but I just want to make two observations in this regard. This was such a big topic, the first, year one and year two into COVID, and it's kind of diminished quite a lot rapidly. And this was really brought home to me in Singapore in September, where I hosted a corporate roundtable at a conference, which Schumann, you were there. You saw there was a table full of HR managers and leaders, right? Corporate HR and corporate mobility HR leaders in Asia. And we asked the question at the table. I think there were like 18 people, 18 organizations represented. We said, like, whose organization here actually has policy or even guidelines, or is or is moving, even has virtual assignments? And one person put up their hand. There's one company in the entire roundtable that actually, was actually doing it. So anyways, unbelievably, we're into the last 4 minutes. So terrific stuff. It's time to get out the crystal ball. Daniel and Schumann, we're going to start with Schumann. And when all is said and done, here we are, almost in December 2022. Lord knows what actually happened to this year and where it's gone. Almost in 2023. Obviously, we've got several years of turbulence behind us, and whilst it looks like we're coming out of COVID turbulence, it seems like the world has made it sure that we've got lots of other turbulence that we need to be dealing with and expecting as we head into 2023. What are likely to be the priorities in APAC specifically, and if not plural, just what is major priority? What are likely to be the priorities in APAC, or the major priorities for the corporate talent mobility agenda through the coming year? Sure.
Yeah, I really wish that I have that crystal ball, Avrom. And I would say that probably not just mobility, but maybe as an overall people organization, really how can we stay ahead of the game, right? With the possibility of, facing this global recession. But interesting that you bring in a different light today, in terms of how Asia may be able to drive that a little differently. But again, back to my earlier point, whether is there COVID or, is there the pandemic or is there this recession and things like that, we need to continue to look at how do we provide that cost optimized solution to our business, because I would say that everyone is just talking about the same thing. How can you be quicker, faster, and, at the lowest cost, something along this line. The other piece, which I thought is very interesting, and this was something that I take away during my recent conference, someone was just saying that actually without us knowing, right, there has been a change in terms of our lifestyle, which as I think about it, that is quite true. Like when you turn on the TV, you can sign up to your most favorite movie, so you get it on demand. If you want food, sometimes you don't even have to step out of the house. You can actually grab your phone and the food will be delivered to you. So I would say that from a lifestyle perspective, there has been a change, and maybe people might be also expecting that change in terms as well when they relocate. So I think, probably important for us to look into some of these flexible or in-demand relocation options. And last but not least, I've been hearing this quite a fair bit as well in today's session, really that whole importance of how do we continue to put people first, building that very inclusive and safe environment. I think that probably will still have to be the focus for all the companies.
Good one. Thank you, Shuman. You get to bring us home in 1 minute.
As Shuman summarized it well. I think if we read about the news, many of the layoffs, etc., happening around the world, big companies, Amazon, Meta, etc., including also in the banking industry. In the semicon world, I think this is with us already, and we're already looking at a semi downturn, which typically has been a very cyclical business. Going forward, I think it's not unlike some 20 years ago, with China. We really do need to be ambidextrous in terms of as we head into these challenges. How do we keep the momentum going on the talent development side of things? Because again, with the tech world, these cycles are very, very compressed. They come quickly, they go quickly, and then before we know it, we're going to be asked to ramp back up again. So how do we keep that going and maintain a healthy talent agenda? And I think one of the key things we touched on earlier on is how do we introduce flexibility in those assignments to help the company get the biggest bang for the buck.
Excellent. Look at that, 10 o'clock. This has just been amazing. I will just throw very quickly. There are two things that I can absolutely forecast for 2023. The first is that the Alliance for Talent, the Asia Talent Mobility Alliance, or ATMA, will definitely be roaring ahead, and you'll be hearing a lot more from us. That's the first thing I can very confidently predict, and secondly, I can very confidently predict that we will be twisting the arms of both Shuman and Daniel to come back and do other sessions with us, because this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for being generous with your time, your thoughts, and to everybody who's joined us today, and to those who will be listening to the recording, thank you for your support. But in closing, absolutely, once again, thank you so much, Shuman and Daniel, for your time and support today. Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.